Welcome to Chatting with the Experts, a podcast for immigrant women from Africa and the Caribbean who have relocated to the UK or the US or Canada or Australia. In this podcast, we talk about the struggles, but at the same time, we highlight the triumphs that we have experienced while living abroad. And we love sharing our resources and experiences with our fellow immigrant sisters because we know they can benefit from it. My guest today is a fellow African sister and a fellow podcaster. Her name is Nwanneka Tesy, and she lives and works in the US. I am always thrilled to have new guests, and she is no exception.
Oh, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's such an honor.
Absolutely. You're a fellow podcaster. Tell us about that.
Uh, Podcasting to me has always been one of those things I've enjoyed listening to. And I don't think it's specific to a region. Like when you move to US, everyone says Onyocha this or Onyocha that. You might know what I mean.
Yes?
And when I started listening to podcasts, I'll do it while cleaning and doing chores. And my first podcast that my brother turned me to listening to was called Car Talk. They started in the 80s or 70s, and they basically just give you guidance on how to repair your car or car issues. And I just said, this is brilliant. And it had no political rim, you just bring your things and they assist it. And I said, that's so neat. I would love to do something like that one day. And fast forward to 2020, here I am, a podcaster.
I know what you mean. I listened to Car Talk too, and they were on NPR.
Yes,
And there were two brothers, and they were hilarious.
yes.
I remember them. So now let's go back to how did you get to the United States? Tell us about that.
Oh, it's an interesting story. It was not my business plan. I was part of my father's plan. He moved to the US in the early 80s to finish his education and study his master's. He ended up moving us here in the mid 90s when we were really little. And I've been here since. So it wasn't a dream of mine. I've shared this with you. I desperately wanted to move back to Nigeria the day I stepped out of the airplane. I wrote letters back home every day. Yeah, but life happens, and then you end up finding where you meet in the cracks, and you accept that home is in your heart. So that's how I started here.
Home is in the heart. That means a lot,
Mhm.
which means that now that you live here, there's something that happened between you stepping off the plane and saying, oh my gosh, I want to go back home, to, okay, I'm here.
Yes.
Yeah.
We could get onto that later, but yeah, it was a big shift because I did not favor it for 12 years when we moved. So it was a long time being sad.
Oh, yeah, I can understand that fully. 12 years of being sad is a long time. But then look at you today.
Oh, yeah. So
Look at you today.
different.
All right. So we touched on you coming from Nigeria. So that means your formative years were there, correct?
Yes. All the way to about 7 years old, which some people think, oh, well, that's such a long time, but I remember everything.
Hmm.
And I had the opportunity as soon as I finished high school, I made it a must to travel home. So I have some friends there. I know my way around. I'm not that person that, oh, I've never been there a long time and I have no idea. So I'm very versed in what's happening back home.
That's wonderful, wonderful. So you finished high school, you said, and you went back home. Did you go to Lagos? Did you go to Onitsha? Where did you go? Where is home in
I'll
Nigeria?
tell you what, if whenever I go home, people are like, oh, she's from abroad. Let's take her to the city. No, I take the next plane or vehicle that'll take me to Anambra. And my father is from Oka, and my mom is from Onibo. I see home as Onibo because her family, they were very they're very close knit, and they have everyone has what is it, imperfections, right? But I just really loved them. They were really kind to us. So to me, if I ever think of home, aren't you used to grand things now? No, I think of home as the town they're in. It's small. It's just everyone speaks an Igbo dialect. I don't speak. Most of the time, they don't understand my Igbo, and but I love it. It's very backwards thinking, but it's not archaic. Like, oh, the type you would think Igbo. Very chill. It always reminds me of being in the beach somewhere.
Because from what I'm hearing from you, that's where your formative life was, and there's a connection to things sometimes that we can relate to when we were small. Peace. It's just home.
Yes. I remember going to school in Oka, and there's this gigantic tree that would always signal that I'm close to getting home on my dad's side, because when your mom marries, she goes to the dad's side.
Yes.
So I would always look for that tree, and legend has it they can't cut it down. So every time I've been there up to 2018, which was the last time I went home because of COVID, I haven't been back. That tree is still there. It hasn't, yeah, since I was a kid. So I'm hoping that that's part of that town that they keep consistent.
And that tree is significant to you because it represents you prior to coming to the United States.
Yes.
And there's a peace that it seems to give you.
Yeah, I'm that person. No matter the hardship and stress of growing up, either places, I like to think of what is it about a place that brought me the most peace, and what did it teach me about bringing peace to others. So it's where kids would gather and they'll play, and they have the marketplace, and if they have the Hmong festival, that's usually where we'll stand and kind of take in that festival. So it reminds me of all the great things about home.
I can hear that nostalgia in your voice.
Yeah, that's you know. But I will tell people there's a negative to having that vision, because what you're ultimately setting yourself up for failure is you have a vision of peace and then you go home and there's so much difference in your vision and mindset, and life has moved on without you because you're no longer there, and they don't even think you're a native anymore. But so it's like you are always a visitor, but in your mind you're like, this is home. I'm a Igbo. Like what. Sorry, my Igbo keeps slipping. You know what this is about, but to them it's like your Igbo is from the 90s. They can tell because language progresses and changes, but they can tell that your Igbo stopped where you left off, and that's how they will always know you're not really part of what's going on anymore.
And so it's a bittersweet experience.
It is always.
Okay. So now let's move to where we are now. So this is your new country. And I can tell immigrating here was hard. You mentioned that at the beginning. Where did you find your strength to be able to cope? Because immigrating can be hard, as you said. You are familiar with a place, you're familiar with the food, the people, everything there, and then you relocate. And for some people, you relocate through no choice of yours because your parents bring you here. For others, sometimes it's work, it's for better opportunities. But whatever the case, you are leaving something behind, and then you're in a new place. And that place could have been a place that you were anticipating, you couldn't wait to get there. And then also it could be a place that never wanted to be in the first place. So tell us about that.
I think for me, the romantic idea of coming to US was because my father lived here. And when we were finally like, oh, we're moving, that was really where I'm like, oh, this will be good, right? But two things have happened. My mom had a great part in raising us back home because and I always remember if there were issues, right? In terms of if we were scared or we would her home was always what I thought of safety, right? It didn't
Mm-hmm.
matter if it was simple going back to my grandma and my grandpa and her siblings. To me, that was always a safe place. So now we come to this place where we didn't know anyone. She had no family. And we moved to an area where it was predominantly Caucasian. And at the time, I didn't even think there was such a thing. It sounds very childish to think it, but when you're in a country where it's only you guys, and the only thing separating you, it's more of class. We weren't wealthy, we weren't that upper class, we didn't have all those fancy things. So to you, you always assume the separation in all the world is we all look the same, like me. And it's all a matter of, is this person Yoruba, Hausa, all those kind of things, or Igbo? Are they well to do? Will they discriminate because I'm female, a female that's poor? And so you come here and everyone, they sound weird, the food tastes weird, but to them they think they're progressive. But in your head you're like, no, I didn't move here because my place was not progressive. I had to come here. I don't think you get strength from that. I had years where I was crying a lot.
Mm.
Sometimes you in an African household, I'll say Nigerian because that's what I am.
That's what
You're
you
not
are, yes.
really allowed a lot of emotions that signal you are displeased with a decision that's yours as a child. So when you're a child, the dynamic is very much you do what you're told, you listen to instructions, and anything that sounds like you're displeased is an affront and an attack on the decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if we were more emotionally intelligent as a people, the one thing I would tell parents is when a child hates something, that has nothing to do with the fact that you made the decision. Maybe they're just really sad that things are so different,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't understand there wasn't a prep. If you look at corporate America before someone comes into the work, right? They do orientation. Let's tell you what even if it's not 100% accurate of what they're to see, now they're aware of how do I go to the browser? How do I clock in? How do I, if I'm salaried, do you want me to work, past my time? We didn't get an orientation of what to expect, so it's like, and I think it's such a lonely place. What I always told parents who ended up with that same situation where they're trying to move into America and do that, I would tell them be patient with your children, be patient with your spouse. Nothing is an attack on you, and if you don't have to do it, like there were people, I'll tell them, if life in Nigeria is good, like there were people who had it good, and you're just trying to flex to people that you went to America, don't do that. You're going to tear your family apart for no reason at all. And it's not worth it unless you have to do it. I definitely understand. But if you don't have to do it and you're like, I have a really good friend since we were kids. Do you know how many times I've invited him to visit US? He has said no to me every time. He's like, no, my life is okay. The craziness over there is not what I want. He'll visit other countries, but he's like, no, I have no need to be here. So I tell Nigerians, please speak in your heart truthfully as to why you're coming here. And if it's just to show that you can be better than your siblings, my father had a great reason. Education was inconsistent. So if that's why you're bringing here, I absolutely understand. But if you're doing it just to flex, okay, it's everyone has their own destiny. So I do give people that feedback.
So you're saying have a purpose. That's what I'm hearing.
Mm-hmm.
Have a purpose. Don't just come. But you gave all the reasons just because you want to seem like, okay, I'm abroad. I can afford to be abroad. My children are going to be, US citizens or UK citizens. Of, as you said in your dad's case, it was education. But for the
Yes.
most part, when we think about Nigerians, it is education that makes them go anywhere. We have Nigerians even in Alaska. Where there is an educational institution, you must find a Nigerian.
Yeah. It's It's a hard conversation, and it made me always sound to people back home that I was unappreciative and uneducated as to the struggles of Nigeria. It's like, oh, you're saying that because you are living in the US, But you and I know, even if you get to a destination and you see the carnage and all the things that you've had to lose, even if you've made it to that destination, your sense of what you will tell people will sound very different. It's more cautionary. It's not don't come or don't do it. My thing is, please be prepared to lose these things, right? Please be prepared to talk about these things. Please be prepared to understand that there'll be seasons of loneliness, and you have to explain racism to your children, sexism to your children, things that they would not even think of. Now you're basically punishing them for not preparing them on your behalf. And that's what I always, and I think I mentioned this to you, I have no fault in strict upbringing or being a disciplined parent. That we're talking two different things. I'm saying no, I'm telling you, prepare them and be okay having emotional and deep conversations when they're afraid of something that you're telling them to do. Just because you told them and you're inserting your authority is not going to mean anything to a child that doesn't understand why the kids don't want to play with them and why they don't want to respect them, like not respect, but disrespect your kids every day. And most times we were the ones who made all A's, we were the ones who excelled, but you're grouped as very trash. You have no sense, even though you're more educated than even the American kids. So it's those things, and those experiences are not singular to me. It's when I mentor kids, it will be the same thing. It'll be the same conversation. It'll be the same displacement mentally. Even rich kids who study abroad, they could be rich all they want. At the end of the day, you're still African. You'll still have a measure of disrespect, and it's going to make you feel like what's wrong with me. So
That's a good analogy. I think probably, I mean, this is a conversation that needs to be had now. And it's probably a conversation that your generation is going to be more vocal about because, and I'm sure I am your parents' generation. In our generations, we didn't talk about feelings. I remember telling my children that. I said, my mother said, as a kid, the only thing you felt was, you know, a smack. It wasn't abusive, but it was a smack. She said, that's the only feelings. So, like, if I'm sad, children are sad. That the assumption was that you get over it. Other people have done it and gotten over it, and so will you. But some things that I think we trickle down to us, and probably our parents' generations didn't put into account, was that their formative years were in their country,
mm,
and so they didn't have to deal with some of the things that they unwittingly exposed their children to because they were now, as parents, looking for better places, educational wise, etc. At the same time, they didn't understand, as you said, emotional intelligence, pretty new, understanding that children should express themselves. Remember, it was a generation of children should be seen but not heard. And now what's happening is that we, I think, haven't lived abroad much longer, beginning to see it in our children. That, these children may be African, but they're living in America. And so some of the things of American culture has impacted them. And we have to make ourselves aware of them so that we can have a conversation that matters to them. And I'm thinking more and more it's going to be your generation that you're a hybrid in a way, but you've been able to pick up things and you've been able to understand, that children are more than just, oh, I've given birth, I've had a child.
mm,
Children are emotional creatures that you need to nurture. And you need to provide for them, not just physically or, make sure that they have food and shelter. You also have to take care of other things that are going on in their heart. And I think that conversation is going to probably be more your generation than it was ours because, as I said, my mom used to say, children should be seen and not heard. And the only thing if that you feel would be a smack to
Yeah.
get you in line. If you keep asking questions, why, they say, why? Must you know everything?
Yeah.
Just do it
Yeah.
because that's
Um,
what they knew.
I'm going to just say this because I think, regardless of the situation you end up with your parents, I do want to say that one, it's hard work, and I admire people who do it, but I admire people that have the same, close to the same mindset of myself of I'm going to wait till I'm way older, or I'm not going to have kids at all, and either I'm co-parent or mentor. And I think we have to stop seeing that as a shame or an affront to parenthood, to the parents we had. Because basically, when you see someone who's saying that, they've observed it. I don't make this decision selfishly. It's not because I haven't taken care of kids. I've seen how very quickly they can shift to where they're in a lot of pain. And if you're not equipped to deal with that, I don't think you should have kids. I don't care what culture you're in. It's it's unfair to have 7 kids or 8 kids or 20 kids that you're not prepared to say this one or maybe 3 may have deeper emotional needs than just smacking and giving orders. And I have this conversation with American parents. I don't when I mentored their kids, I would always start out with, please tell me what trauma you're inflicting on your kids this year so I'll know what I'm dealing with. And they'll kind of like, they'll be taken aback. I'm like, yeah, because you guys give me new and interesting things for me to help guide your children through. So instead of having me ask the child who did not inflict the trauma, let me just ask the parent, what trauma are you giving them or allowing to happen so that I can know how to mentor your kids this year? And I think if we are more honest to yourself, like I even have African parents who they're like, I'm just having 2, that's it. And I'm like, good for you. You've assessed what is possible for you and you've said this is what I can deal so I can give them attention. Or I've had parents who are like, we have to have 5 because I financially can take care of 5. I emotionally can take care of 5. I'm like, fantastic. And and the thing I love about the Nigerian people is the ability to grow anywhere. Put us in any situation, we will probably make it heaven if we want to. And we will keep going until we reach the destination, right? And when I this is a side note, sometimes when I realized that when I get employed with employers, right? The first thing is, well, she sounds very different. Like she could be from different parts of the world, but then they bring me aboard and I give them their name. I just realized what facial expression they used to make, and I didn't know what it was then. But basically, when I'll go to finally meet them, this is their expression. And I kid you not, they're like, oh, like they're relieved. They're like, oh, great, we have a Nigerian. They're gonna work hard and they're intelligent. So it's a great presentation of who we are. So it always makes you kind of like saddened, not because you don't know everyone's life when they had an experience with the wrong one, the one that didn't come to work, the one that didn't put effort, because majority of the time, by the time you walk into any door, once a professor senses that you're African, there's that, oh, whew, okay, good. I know this person is going to be respectful of me. They're going to even give me insight that I may not know. Their parents are going to be on them. They're going to take their time seriously. So that I admire it. And I'm super like, I'm disciplined. Even as an adult, I still wake up early. I read and meditate in the morning. I have an exercise routine. And I can trace that all back to the discipline that I got from my parents. And I've never been that person, well, this happened to me. I'm just going to go opposite and just not do anything with my life. And I think that's the lesson and story they're told by their colleagues. Well, if you don't teach them to fear you, they're just going to do whatever. And what I'm telling people to define for me is what is whatever, right? And you find that whatever is not even, oh, they're going to live a good life without you. Their whatever is immediately, they're going to become a prostitute. I'm like, I go back to that, are you an idiot? Like, are you an idiot? And then I joke with them, do you know it takes skills to be a prostitute? You didn't teach us that, It's like, and then they're more upset. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, do you know there's skills to every job? We didn't get that skill because we're so repressed and so afraid. You can't be that and be good at that job you're telling our parents that's what we're going to lead into if we don't follow their every command. So it's that rhetoric of they're going to do things differently. Let's define what differently means, right? And what are we afraid of? Like if I have a child and my only idea for them is, oh, they're going to be a doctor and they're going to follow my command like they're a dog. And then my child comes to me and said, Mom, I think I want to be a designer. Then suddenly, what? My child is bad because they are telling me an alternate universe for themselves. So let's start with being truthful and define what the other is. What is that other? If my child says, hey, I don't want to be X, Y, and Z, I don't want to be a teacher, I want to be, I don't know, a chef. I'm like, you know what? If that's what we're taking you to the best, you're getting to the best school for that thing you tell me you want to be. I think that's the dialogue we should have differently. Let them make money in that field you didn't think they could make money. And let's see where they go. And if it doesn't work out, remember, we've had this conversation. I'd rather be there supporting you and it works out, then you can cancel the fact that I didn't stand in your way. But remember, if that child ends up making that life you hated work out, they're not coming back to you. There was no support there. So what should I come back to? It worked. I had to crawl 8 million ways. I could have gone one way because I see my white friends making it. But you made it hard for me. It was always an argument against your authority. And they still make it. Those kids don't have any relationship with their parents. So it's more of how can we salvage the two worlds, the child and the parent, so we all feel that we're supported. I think that's where my conversation always leads to. What kind of relationship do you want with both parts at the end of your life?
And those are deep conversations that can only start with a conversation. And I think that's what you are doing.
Yes.
You are spreading awareness. You are a child of Nigerian immigrants who, from what I'm hearing, experience things that looking back now, you would not want that to happen to another child,
Yeah.
especially in a foreign environment or in a place other than, in your case, Nigeria. And so I hear in you a voice of an advocate. I hear in you a voice for as an advocate for children of Nigerian parents, of Nigerian immigrants. Because I heard two things. I heard the pride that, oh, well, we are instilled with discipline to get to a place and make it happen and excel. But I also hear the flip side to that is, however, in this environment that we are in, we have to take note that there are alternative ways of making a living that are not necessarily, I don't want to use the word, not necessarily not accepted by the society, but are ways in which if that child is passionate about it, stand with that child, support that child, be there for that child, and know that most times, well, I think statistics have shown that if you love what you're doing, whatever job it is, you're going to do you're going to excel at it.
Yes.
So if you are a designer and you love your job, you're going to be the best designer ever. If you are a dancer, you're going to be the best dancer
Mhm.
ever. But it matters to that child to know that you're supporting them.
On the topic of that, I think what I will also point out now that we're discussing it is when parents are in disagreement with any type of field their child should get into, remember that's okay, right? You can tell a child, I don't want you to do this field, and then present the reasons, right? You can still tell the child, no, you have to study this because it's more lucrative, but I'm here to understand why you don't want to. I'm here to hear why you want to do this other thing. And perhaps, maybe, can we find an alternate school that you can do both? I ended up doing both. I studied business, I still taught dance, and I still competed in bodybuilding. All the things they didn't want me to do, none of the degree they supported. But I still ended up doing it, and I take care of myself. No one has ever done anything for me. But there wasn't that conversation of like, what would that look like if you were to chase that? What would that do? But it was always a feel, well, that's not what's done. It'll bring shame to this family and this and this. And I said, okay, well, what if that child said, I don't want to be part of this family? And it's not shaming me as a family. So I don't know what this conversation is doing for me anymore. And I hear this a lot. I hear this a lot. And I hear where the older adult is like, I'm so there was nothing for me there. And then remember when you miss something, right? Your head goes to when I was in that space, how what emotion did it bring for me? And you see why people are able to heal different relationships and then we don't understand. We're like, I thought you said it was not, because they're able to think of things that they missed. They're like, you know what? If we can focus on that, then this is able to be repaired. Then you have the flip side where the person remembers even the good parts, but they always remember there's always the bad part right after. And when they think of that, and that's how they always felt, or it made them feel like they could themselves turn into that same way of thinking, then it doesn't move them to go back to that at all. Mhm.
So, what would your solution be?
My solution, like anything in this world, is there isn't a quick solution. There's only an opportunity to have conversations. The same with the race issue in this world, you have to have conversation and you have to have uncomfortable conversations. And you have to be okay knowing that it has nothing to do with disrespecting you as a person. All the person is saying, can I talk to you about a different way of thinking? I still tell people what is your objective at the end, right? What are you striving to say, I want people to think I'm in control and I'm the big guy? Great. You have your kids so they're 18 and they won't see you again. If that's your wish, your wish will come true. And yes, your colleagues will think you have respect and you have no kids. Good job for you. But don't come to my inbox crying to me anymore because as a child, I used to think these parents or fathers whose kids in African cultures didn't speak to them was, what did the kid, my heart feels for you. Let me be the so-called stand-in daughter because I understand. Then you become the adult and you just find that you could never talk to these adults. And it makes sense. So I have that conversation. I'm like, at the end, what do you want? It's all about you. If that's what you want, yeah, keep going. Keep disciplining your kids like that. Like you are a godlike creature. They can't ever question you. Everything they do is wrong and they never feel good enough. Or you can say, I'm still in control, but I want to listen to what's actually happening in my household. Isn't that the only difference between a great CEO and any CEO? you still have to come to work. I can't be like, no, I'm not coming to work today because you don't listen to me. You'll get fired. But another CEO will say, well, why are my employees not wanting to come to work? Let me figure that out, because it's not just a one employee thing. I see a turnover every 5 months or every 4 months. Like, I get it, but what's going on with my company? And then you see how they revamp the company to figure out how can we retain employees who are leaving at a quick rate. So that is a conversation. It's not about changing your person or leaving your leadership or your throne. It's about, I want to figure out why this isn't working.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And that's why I say, Nwanneka, you are the advocate. You are that voice. You are the person who can bring awareness to these situations, because people can't give what they don't have.
Mm.
And when you don't know what you don't know, you can't do it.
Yeah.
So what you need to have voices out there who are saying, right, this is what you are doing, but look at the outcome, or consider these alternatives, or open up your mind to embrace other things. And it's only when sometimes that conversation is had, and like you said, a hard conversation, that people, not everybody, but some people have their times where they sit back and rethink or recall the conversation of that advocate and say, mm-hmm,
Mm.
that's true, and I can change.
Yeah.
But many times people don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
And this is the time to start talking out. This is the time to bring awareness to it, because like your parents' generation, we are all getting older. But you know, your parents' generations are probably grandparents, and they can ensure that that way of thinking is changed. One of my guests recently said she and her husband have decided they'll take the best in all cultures, or in
Mm-hmm.
everything. They're taking the best from she's from Cameroon and he's from Congo. They take the best from there, and they take the best from the Western culture and give that to the children. They said to their children, they said, there's some things they tell their children, look, just throw in the trash. And
Yeah.
there's some things that they tell themselves, we need to throw in the trash. I
Mm-hmm.
think those are conversations that need to be had. And she too, similar to you, she is very instructional in, or intentional in how she talks to her children, and even in how she mentors children.
Yeah.
So I think it's a conversation that's worthwhile having. Things can't change until, as I said, people don't realize they don't know everything,
Yeah.
and that there are alternate ways of doing so many things,
Yeah.
not just what they know.
And it's so funny. When I'm working, so I'm in a leadership role in work, and I remember one parent of mine asking me, well, how do you even get along with people there? Because in their imagination, because I don't listen to everything they say, it must mean I'm a rigid leader. And I said, no, we don't have disagreements, because I do take the bullet and I do hear when my team does not like what I'm doing. I've been in emails where they're like, oh, you could have done this differently. Your teams think you could be supporting them in this way. I'm like, oh, that makes sense. And I have to talk to my team. What I don't do is, well, what I'm doing is what I was taught, so I'm not changing that. See, I would not make it in leadership. So we're not talking about, I think people think because you don't communicate to them means you have issues communicating with everyone else. No, you've equipped yourself to communicate even when things are hard for you, even when you're hearing unpleasant things about yourself, and you learn to adjust. And it's not because it's the workplace, it's also in your friendships you value, and you say to yourself, hey, this is what I want. You've learned to kind of communicate that. I'm so sorry. Do you see he's very needy? He's like, you've been talking to someone without me.
What?
This is saint, but yeah.
Oh, he is so cute. What breed?
He's a pit bull.
He's a pit bull. You see, that's another conversation that we have because the assumption pit bulls cannot be friendly
I
and
know.
trusted.
They are big babies. If you treat them well, they are big babies. And so his thing was, you've been talking, I'm hearing your voice, but I'm not seeing you. So he's like, I'm going to let you know I still exist.
Mm. But even talking about pit bulls and dogs in particular. So I grew up in a culture where your dogs lived outside, never inside. And I said, never will I ever have a dog. Now I have a dog, and now I understand. And it took time. It took time. My son really asked me for this dog, and I reluctantly said yes. And I will tell you, Waneka, his name is Haven. Haven is a blessing to the family. I've seen what should I say, unconditional love
Yeah.
meted out to each member of the family. He sees you. You can go upstairs and come back down. It's like, he hasn't seen you in 20 hours,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, hello, you know. And people told me that, but until I experienced it, I could not relate to it.
Yeah.
And so that brings me back to the conversation we've been having. Until sometimes people experience it, or until they, open up their mindset to, oh, let me just give it a try,
Yeah.
then they cannot relate to those sort of conversations. This conversation has been amazing. It's been deep, but we've touched things that I think need to be talked about, and things that need to be talked about by none other than you, because we all have a purpose, and there's sometimes we don't understand, and I'm not saying that's the case with you, but sometimes it begins with one voice and then another. And so you bringing up some of these topics as the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, and even you're an immigrant too, because you came from Nigeria when you were how old? You said 7? Yeah, when you were 7. And so your formative years were in Nigeria. You still remember things. And that hasn't left you. But at the same time, you've lived here. And so you've been exposed to things that if you were back home, you would not have been exposed to.
Correct.
So, how would you summarize everything? I mean, come here, parents, having come here as an immigrant, as a child of immigrants, and as an immigrant yourself. And now we'll fast forward in, you don't have to say your age, we'll fast forward to 20 plus years.
Yeah, I'm in my early 30s. I don't mind. I think it's a privilege to even get to this point in my life. I don't
I
mind.
agree.
Mhm.
I agree 100%. Every day is a blessing because
Yeah.
some people didn't have that
Yeah.
blessing. Yeah. So, how would you summarize if you were, I want to say, if you were to be a parent, let's go in that way. Let's say you can now step into your parents' shoes and be the parent of bringing a 7-year-old Waneka. What would you say?
I would first say every time you want to cry, know that I understand. And any time you want to come to me and you find it difficult, here is a list of people that I trust that you can go to. And it's okay if you don't bring it to me because you're uncomfortable. It does not take away my parenthood. And I'm okay with that. And I'm here to love you through whatever you need to go through.
That is significant.
Mhm.
And that, my dear, is what I think your generation of immigrants and children of immigrants can do that would change a lot of lives because you've experienced it and you're talking from a place of not authority, but you're talking from a place of having lived it, having experienced it, and now knowing that this is a better method. So walk with me in this. And you're speaking to people your age and even younger who are coming up because there's nothing new under the sun. What you've been
Yes,
through is not unusual. What you've been through is not unique to you, but there's somebody who needs to hear this
I agree.
because that can change their lives.
I agree.
Well, thank you, Nwanneka. I just want to ask you, where can someone connect with you online?
So they can find me. The best place that I communicate with people that I don't know really is Instagram.
Mhm.
They can find me. It's called Living the Life podcast on Instagram. That's the best way, and I'm very responsive. Of course, you can also find me with Nwanneka Tesy on Facebook. Just I always tell people that was the one I kind of use for people that I know well or their colleagues or associates that I communicate like this. So usually, if I don't know you too well, it might not let you add me. That's just the way I've set it up. But yeah, Living the Life podcast on Instagram is the best way to get a hold of me.
Thank you so much. So, for my listeners, if you have enjoyed what you just heard from Nwanneka Tesy, please head over to Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts and subscribe. I also would ask you to follow me on these platforms. And if you are an immigrant woman from Africa, and I say Africa to mean all the countries in Africa, Africa is not a country, it's a continent. Or if you're an immigrant woman from the Caribbean, and the Caribbean is made up of many islands, it's not one place, and have found this story and the other stories that you've heard interesting, please let us know in your reviews. And even more importantly, if you'd like to be a guest on Chatting with the Experts, please head over to my website, which is www.chattingwiththeexperts.com/contact us. And let's chat. I love to chat with my guests.